Fantastic. Okay, next up, we're going to hear from Ilyas Khan, who's the CEO of Quantinuum, who's going to tell us about what if and what is articulating the vision for a quantum-powered future and what's needed to get there. Ilyas Khan, over to you.
Good afternoon. The first thing I want to do is to thank and congratulate the organizers, The Economist, for an incredible event. I think when I was first told about this, I thought, yeah, another one on the calendar. And you immediately start thinking of who you can send. And I think this fantastic confluence of people who are here, it's not just that virtually everybody who's involved in quantum is here, but those organizations have sent their leaders. And so I think this takes some doing, and I think The Economist needs to be congratulated for that. Of course, all the people who've gone into making this an incredible event need to also be congratulated, and I'd like to do that as well. We're proud to be involved, and I wanted to, in my introduction also, say hello to so many friends and colleagues who've been on this journey with us. I've been a part of this, and I can see so many people here. I won't say any names. Jay's obviously one of them, who was speaking just before me. And we've been on this journey. But the fantastic thing is, every time we see one of these events and we get here, we see new people involved and new people who can add balance and who can give perspective so that the informed consensus gets broader and deeper, and that the language that we use becomes more common. And so the way in which we can communicate with people who might be customers or partners becomes standardized. This takes a long time. I've been involved in this gig for 8.5 years, and we're still not even scratching the surface. In any event, if I can get this bloody thing to work, yeah, there we go. I was going to quickly introduce ourselves. I won't say very much on this because I want to get into what I think is the meat of the conversation, but we are Quantinuum, and Quantinuum is a result of a merger between Honeywell Quantum Solutions, my colleague Tony, who is the president of Honeywell Quantum Solutions and who is my partner and the president of Quantinuum, was on the panel just before Jay, and I'm the chief executive. There's about 450 of us around the world. We are very much an integrated firm, and I'll try and explain what that means. And then I'm going to try and explain to you, I'm going to lift the hood on what we actually do, beyond the name and beyond some of these announcements that come out about our collaborations. We have commercial collaborations in the United States, in North America, of course, in Europe, in Japan, in Asia. And I just want to try and lift the lid on what all of that means, then bring it together with some timelines. This, in many different ways, this slide has been referred to by almost everyone that has spoken, including people that are on the panel. It's a variation of a theme. And I'm grateful, actually, for Jay, who spoke just before me, for giving me an insight into the misuse of certain aspects of language. I had the pleasure of speaking to Jay one-on-one yesterday. Some of you might be aware that IBM is an investor, a shareholder of Quantinuum, and we, Quantinuum, are a private sector IBM Quantum Hub. We are one of the world's leading users of the IBM device. We have day-to-day knowledge of what the technology that Jay was talking about translates into. And when you try and have a look at the way in which that translates into timelines, I think that there's been a slight misstep over the course of the last year when the mutually exclusive NISC and fault-tolerant eras have started to become standards that people sort of put up. If you imagine a medieval joust, or if you imagine, I don't know, Genghis Khan's hordes coming across, oh, well, we're in the NISC era and we're going to conquer, and other people think, no, well, you may as well pack up and wait until fault-tolerant. And actually, the reality of what we're finding and the experiences that we're having is that when Preskill, John Preskill, coined that term, he didn't actually mean the term in the way it's become commonly used. And so I think this timeline, and you'll notice I haven't put any dates there, because that informed consensus about when things can and can't be done is currently absent. You can very easily extrapolate, but that extrapolation has so many assumptions that you end up not saying very much. But that slide, I just go back to it, is one of the reasons why we're all here, and one of the reasons why quantum has become a nation-state strategy. And it's not the quantum technology that's the strategy, it's the quantum industry. This economic impact and the industrial revolution that we are all living through is like no other. That's not hype. There's no hype involved there. I don't want to sell you some snake oil or anything. You've just got to accept that. We all accept that. That's why China, the United States, the United Kingdom, the European community, large organizations realize that there's nothing like this that has ever happened. Now, when you take that on board and you try and figure out a route map, one of the motivations is, well, what does it mean? And you'll have seen variations on this slide as well. And people are trying to figure out what the economic impact will be. You can measure it in revenues, you can measure it in dislocation, you can also measure it, and governments care about this, on the economic impact on their economies. These things combine together to lead to why this tipping point in the last 12 months has happened. These are organizations, and this slide can be represented in many different ways, that have budget and are interested. We heard from Bayer earlier. We have clients such as Total and BMW, and we have clients that are involved at different areas of exploration. And what they're doing is not flippant and it's not trivial. It's very hard. And the reason they're doing this is that they buy into the previous two slides. That encounter between commerce and the exploration of use cases with the reality of where we are and where we might get to constitutes the environment in which we currently operate. So what I want to do is, as I said, lift the hood on what we're all about. So right now, we have a product that can't be done without a quantum computer. And I'll explain why in a couple of slides' time. It is a cybersecurity product, and it is now in production. That means people pay, they buy keys, we deliver them, and they use them in the day-to-day environment. And this is a sweeping revolution in cybersecurity. In 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 years' time, take your pick, maybe 10, this is how all keys will be seeded. They will be non-deterministic. They will be patternless because you can extract this from nature using entanglement, which is one of the qualities that quantum mechanics allows us. So we, using our quantum computer, which is based in Colorado, and coincidentally using many others as well, in trials we use the Oxford Quantum Circuits computer here, we've used the IBM computer as well, we generate patternless pools of entropy that can be used to seed keys, and large organizations are now using them. And you don't need to reinvest $1 billion just to change a network, because it's that base level that gets changed. That's obviously also the most strategically important. And then in chemistry, we're at a different tipping point. We're not going to solve problems, and as we heard earlier, drug discovery or material discovery actually doesn't take 15 years. What takes 15 years in the pharmaceutical industry is to get from concept to actual production and selling it to the patient that needs it. There are different levels at which technology gets involved. But in chemistry, partially for the reason that Jay mentioned, because of this late 2023 emergence of circuit complexity, which allows us to gain advantage in certain areas, large organizations are going to be using this. I'm going to come back to that one as well. Look, on AI and machine learning, the jury is out. Out on what? There's a clump of religious fanatics that think that quantum's never going to make an impact, and there's an equally religious group of fanatics that think that it's going to change the world. Well, of course, what's the timeline and when does that happen? I think next year's conference, and possibly even the one after, might not be able to answer that. That's a little bit further out. And that's got to be a lot of different things that come together. And when we hear about announcements, when large corporate organizations allocate budget to this, it's because actually one of those religious fanatics might be right, and it changes everything they do. And it's an existential risk to what they represent to their shareholders. That's why people are getting involved. So Total is a good example of a client of ours who decided to do this, but not the only one. And then you get into AI. And this, of course, is, I've spoken about this, written about this. Quantum does change everything. And there's an ethical issue here. And everything we call AI at the moment is approximate and opaque and dangerous. We, all of us who have children, live the consequences of this. And we might like it when our share price goes up, and we might like it that we buy a bloody yacht or something, but there's something else at stake here. And when quantum AI is around, it resets the rules. It's not going to be tomorrow. That could be 5 or 10 years ago. And we've got a unit in Oxford, it might even be 12 years away, that looks at language processing. Because if you crack language, and no machine today understands anything about language, it does not know what red means. So the next time you ask, I don't know, Alexa what time it is, and it burns up the equivalent of electricity to drive you to Reykjavik for a week and tells you what you already know, that is not AI. And it's not language processing. But we will get there. So that's the way we see it as a firm, and we cover the spectrum, and our base layer, of course, is our hardware. Now, when you pull that together, it's just, again, you can represent this in many different ways. This is our integrated stack. We deliver solutions. We don't sell hardware. We're not trying to get people to buy machines. We're all about solutions. That's what Quantinuum is. For those of you that want these slides, I'll make sure that if you ask me or anybody at The Economist, there's nothing sacred or secret about this. You can have any of these slides. Just reach out to me or somebody at The Economist. Now I am in my last 3.5 minutes, but I've got 10 minutes to talk about, so I'm going to cram it into 3. So what does it mean, science-led enterprise driven? You go onto our website, we have over 1,000 publications. We believe in empirical evidence for every statement that we ever make. I was reminded this morning by the head of my cybersecurity cryptography team, a guy called Florian, and he'd seen some video of mine, and I said, the way that we generate this entropy is device independent. And he said, no, Ilyas, it isn't. It is almost device independent because we talk to a machine that's many, many miles away, and we have to assume that that machine isn't a quantum simulator. I'm kept honest by the 350 scientists, because if I say something to you that is claptrap, it's not what you think, it's what my people think. That is what Quantinuum is, and that is what we will continue to be, because we need to do that along with many, many, many other quantum companies who adhere to the same standards. But we're enterprise-driven. We care about solving problems. That balance, I think, is possible. And all this angst about hype, and Bob Souter was on here earlier, I'm in Bob's camp, right? There's always going to be somebody that wants a bit of cash in his back pocket by selling you something that doesn't work. It's been happening since the tulip mania. And there'll be someone else that comes along. This is not unique to quantum. I would honestly stop worrying about that, and I'd focus on this informed consensus that is being built. Now, we also have, as do IBM, as do many other hardware companies, a published roadmap. It is transparent. And what we believe is that because for the last 3 years, whenever we've said we're going to do something, we then do it, and we do it in the timeline, and we publish, and we empirically get independent verification, we gain and build trust. Our hardware roadmap is one of the foundations of what we are as a business. We've chosen to go down the trapped iron route. But as a firm, we are platform neutral. Some of you may be aware of Ticket. Ticket is now, I think it might well be the leading software development kit. We have over 500,000 people around the world that use Ticket, for God's sake. I mean, I spoke in December, we barely had 100,000. And that 500,000, it's open source, by the way. That 500,000 will become 2 million, then it'll become 5 million, then it'll become 20, and before you know it, there'll be 100 million people using it. And what does that mean? That virtuous circle, and Jay was talking about error mitigation, and that learning that IBM can employ to make that runtime faster is inevitably linked to the community of people who aren't even here today. And that's what building the ecosystem is all about. So that hardware roadmap I'd recommend. Oh, listen, do I get turned off if I go over this red thing? Can I have an extra 2 minutes? You don't zap me or something. So I wanted to lift the hood, as it were, on two things. I'll be very quick about this. So actually, what does quantum origin mean? So it's a product, and the first instantiation of that product is a key. And I think the rest of it is so well talked about on our website that I won't go into it too much. But that is real. So the next time somebody says we're 30 years away from a real product, we're not. This is a real product. It comes from a quantum computer. You can't do it on a classical, and people are using it and paying for it, right? And that estimate of, I don't know how many millions of dollars, I think somebody said $500 million of revenue. If you split that out between hardware and software, it's predominantly hardware at the moment, everybody knows the 80-20 rule. And of course, applications is where the money and the revenues will be. Then, I'm going to skip that. Next week or the week after, we will launch what we think, and if anybody can contradict me, please do, is the first enterprise-level computational software for chemistry that is entirely quantum. We've partnered with BioVia. We've had 8 or 9 global material discovery companies who have been beta testing this for over a year. BioVia is a leader in the classical space, and they will be selling this to their clients at an enterprise level. I won't say much more about that. And because I'm a minute over, I'm going to stop right now. I could go on for a few more minutes, but thank you very much indeed, and a big thanks again to The Economist.